Data Simple, where we make the world of data effortless, relevant, and yes, even fun.
So hey, it's Making Data Simple 2019. Al Martin, your host here. Thank you to the listeners. I didn't think this podcast would obviously take off as much as it has, and it has, and I thank you for that. Selfishly, I just enjoy it. So if you enjoy it as well, it's a bonus. Today, I have with me Adam Weinstein as a guest. Adam is an entrepreneur, and he's co-founder and CEO of Cursor. Now, I want to get more feedback, Adam, on your path to Cursor, because I think you have a very interesting career path that I think the listeners will also find interest in. But Cursor, I read some of the stuff. I do my research, as you might imagine. And the one line that stuck out for me for Cursor was, it's a data collaboration platform built to help your team find, understand, and use data more efficiently by leveraging the power of shared knowledge. So anyway, I want to get to that point. You have an intriguing story. I'd like you to walk me through it, introduce yourself, and where you've been and where you're going.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks for having me on the show. It's really great to chat. Background is certainly nonlinear, right? Like, I think it's interesting to look backwards sometimes. But started off life as a consultant. It was sort of a both technical and business sort of in life from the get-go, right? So I was computer science and business undergrad. I was a consultant at Deloitte for a couple of years, focused on architecture and infrastructure, a lot of data infrastructure work actually at the time. And I think my first foray in data was at a company called ExactTarget. So ExactTarget was in the email marketing space in the early days of email marketing. So if you imagine you want to send a few hundred emails, it's really easy to do. If you want to send 300 million every morning, if you're Groupon, it's a little bit harder. So ExactTarget powered a lot of the large, particularly retail campaigns in the world. And as such, we had a ton of data, but we didn't necessarily have a formal BI function. So started the BI team there, was, I guess you could call it, first analyst, everything from building pipelines to reports and kind of in between. I think that's where the bug bit me. So been in that world ever since. So I was with ExactTarget from about 100 people to well over 1,000. Left before they were ultimately acquired by Salesforce, but was 2 blocks away at the time. So actually started a greeting card company, of all the irony, from email to paper goods as a side venture at first, and then a full-time job for a few years, and ended up selling that to the company that printed them. I won't dive too much in the greeting card space, but like to send sarcastic cards to friends and family, and was always traveling and never found a way to do it, and so wanted a way to go online, have it printed and mailed with better handwriting than I had, and automate the whole thing. And then, made my way out west in 2012 to a startup called Bright that was in the machine learning space, focused on how to match jobs to people. So if you think about looking for a job traditionally online, you'll search for, I want to be a product manager or an account executive. We would take a resume and identify the jobs that person was most qualified for, no matter what the title was. So as crazy as titles have gotten, like sometimes the skills you have may not necessarily represent the title that may be out there. Bright was acquired by LinkedIn in 2014, and so I was sort of the, I guess you could call it, one-man data band at Bright. We were about 55 people when LinkedIn bought us, and I ended up joining this, what was at the time about 200-person analytics org. And analytics at LinkedIn was everything from data science all the way through, traditional kind of BI or kind of data warehousing type work. And this challenge that we had that was really fascinating, and sort of what became the idea behind Cursor. So I came in, new guy, company had been around for 11 years, I guess, at that point. Mature in some ways, but still growing quite fast. We went from 5,000 to 10,000 people over about 18 months at that point. And this challenge that we had around knowledge management. So I got tasked with, of all the things, going and setting up LinkedIn China. So we had created a subsidiary to handle all of the sort of new venture / development that we were doing in China, which I think we were the only social network that was really operating there at the time with a license. And we didn't necessarily have a great place to go look and say, okay, here are all the places to look for data, here's who owns that data, here's who manages it, here's got the best understanding of it. So I ended up having like 200 coffees around the business in my first couple of months there. And that was literally I think it was a Google sheet or something similar, right, that I built that kept track of everything from code to data to, people and what engineer wrote it. Became this sort of really valuable knowledge base that didn't have any sort of structure to it whatsoever, right? It was just my notes from all these meetings. And so I realized that, when you've got these, whether it's a high growth company or just a large enterprise, how you manage this notion of what data lives where, what it means, how people use it from end to end, right? From acquisition all the way through sort of consumption is a challenge that a lot of companies face. And so that was impetus to start Cursor, right? And I think a lot of the work that we did at LinkedIn was more traditional analytics than, I guess you might call it data science, but it was moving that direction, right? And so, that's a long-winded story of me.
It's a good story, though. I can tell you I'm more than a little bit envious here, and mostly because it's not a straight line, to your point. And I'll just quote it just to recap here off of LinkedIn, but analyst Deloitte, business analyst for Exact Target, founder in Ingrid, that was acquired by Designer Greetings, then head of analytics on Bright.com, then which was acquired by LinkedIn, then you're a senior manager of business development at LinkedIn, and then you're the co-founder and CEO of Cursor. Wow. And interesting, when I started off, you started out at Purdue with an industrial management and computer science degree. So you have the computer science in there, but you got the industrial management in there.
Yeah.
So here's my first question. And that is, you've got themes of business intelligence, you got themes of security, business development, data science. I guess I don't know that it's all predicated on data either. I was about to say it's all predicated on data. I don't know if the early stuff was. You'd have to tell me. But how do you define yourself? I mean, are you a business leader? Are you a technologist?
Yeah, the startup leader, right? I joke that sometimes I'm as much a janitor as anything else, right? There's no skill that you don't need to have some part of, I think, to be, impactful, I guess, at this stage, right? Calling myself a CEO is kind of a silly thing, right? When we're a small team, but at the same time, I consider myself quite analytical, right? And so I like to be technical, like I like to jump into code and see how things actually work, and I think that as an early stage company, that helps us get to results quicker. I think, especially in the Valley, the sort of more technical, product-minded leaders are ones that tend to get things to market quicker and hopefully find that sort of magical product market fit sooner. But yeah, I call myself a nerd that should never be paid to code, but that does too often. But at the same time, one that's been a user plenty of times in life and that has a lot of empathy toward people that work with data. And so I think I'm an analyst at heart, honestly. And that analyst phrase can mean so many different things, right? That the modern analyst is someone that they have to understand the business needs, they have to understand the data, they have to understand that there's 300 competing priorities, and they are kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, right? Or hopefully master of some. That's me in a nutshell.
So you answered one of my questions, and you actually get your hands dirty, and you do get in the code. You code yourself?
Yeah, a little here and there, right? I don't spend as much time as I wish I did. You could probably count the number of places where I've actually contributed something meaningful to our code base. I do, anything that's non-production. I do a ton of our infrastructure work. Probably most of the infrastructure that's production is mine. So the automation around that and deployment of it, security, that kind of thing. Within our production code base, I think there's a collective gasp in the room anytime I commit anything. So I'll try to limit the number of moments that takes the team stuff away to as few as possible. But there's some of that too. It's just a time thing, right? Balancing, going out and selling, developing business, partnerships, setting roadmap, fundraising, all that kind of stuff with actual time to sit down and code, which honestly can be enjoyable sometimes when you when you find the time.
So what languages do you code in if you do get the chance? And I get the point.
So I don't have the time these days. If I'm playing around with the product, so we're Python and SQL based, right? We offer a Python and SQL editor within the product, right? So I'll write some Python in there. A lot of data code, right? So whether it's SQL, Pig, what other query languages I guess are being used these days? Mostly those two, right? I used a ton of Pig at LinkedIn. In terms of our product, it's written in Kotlin. So I haven't done a whole lot of Kotlin. Kotlin's sort of a Java derivative, heavily used in Android ecosystem, but we use it just so we can interact with a lot of the libraries that the sort of data stores of the world use. And then front end's all React or JavaScript. So I'll do a little bit in that realm, not a whole lot, but again, dabble when I feel like I need to or want to, and that kind of thing.
Well, I can tell you can talk the language, so you're doing more than just the business piece. So good for you. I don't know if the engineers that are working with you appreciate it, but it's good that you talk both languages.
I think they appreciate when I jump in and jump out just as quickly, right? And but sometimes it's good, I think, for me to be able to be, respectful of how things get planned, right? Sometimes it's very easy to say, oh, that can get done in a few days, and to understand the depth of the code base, at least at this stage, right, is really helpful to, making sure that you're being fair in how things get scheduled.
Well, I hear you on that. If my team is listening, I'm always like cut everything in half type of. What is it? That Steve Jobs distortion. What is it? His distortion field or whatever they used to call it. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah. Reality field.
Yeah, the distortion reality field. That's exactly what it is. So, are you? I know you're in the Valley right now. Where are you originally from?
So originally from Indianapolis, right? So it was Purdue, just up the road. Tried to go as far away from college as humanly possible, and somehow ended up 60 miles up the road. So went straight up I-65 after that. Was in Chicago when I was at Deloitte. Got brought back to Indianapolis for ExactTarget. Actually debated moving out west at that point, but ET was a good opportunity. And then moved out west in 2012. So the connection out west to Bright was actually the same investor that introduced me to ExactTarget. So when ExactTarget grew and became big, I wanted to get back to small roots after Ingrid. And so the same investor that happened to be based in Indianapolis introduced me to the two guys that started Bright. And so I moved out at that point.
Oh, nice. And so where do you live? Actually, you live in San Jose? Where you live?
I live in San Francisco. So I'm a 10-minute walk to work, which is nice. Bay Area traffic you've had to experience is.
Yeah.
It's a special flavor of traffic, right?
It's not Indianapolis, that's for sure.
No.
You're not a Colts fan, are you?
I am a Colts fan. It's our season is over, but if you watch the first 6 games, the end was still better than I expected.
I am, delivering this podcast from Kansas City, where I'm from.
I know. Good luck this weekend.
Yeah, well, I pray, or I got a lot of bets that I got to pay up on, and that's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, nobody wants Tom Brady to win anything else, right? Like, he's got all he needs.
Exactly. But I got to wear his shirt for a week.
Oh, geez.
But if I lose, so I cannot afford
that's horrible.
I know. It's like the worst bet ever. I'll pay $200 to get out of that bet, whatever it is. All right, so why cursor data? I was looking at cursor data. I was looking at the Twitter, and your last tweet I thought was kind of a good lead-in. It said, data scientists are spending too much time acquiring and cleansing data. We can reduce that effort if we increase data literacy and collaboration and offload that work to others. And, I preach on this a lot, and I've done a lot of pitches and presentations, and the numbers are astounding. And that is 80% of the energy of every big data and analytics project spent finding, cleansing, and understanding the data. You get that from Forbes. Only 15% of organizations fully leverage their data. That's also Forbes. Only 0.5% of all data is actually analyzed. MIT. 91% of organizations are not using their data effectively. That's IDC. I could keep going on and on, but there's your lead in, my cursor data.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, right? So we have this challenge at LinkedIn where a lot of data work, believe it or not, is still done in a very individual manner, right? Whether it's something as basic as writing like an ad hoc query of something that might be relatively well structured, or it's something that's where you're exploring some raw data, trying to get some sort of insight out of it. And the challenge with that is that even when you're done delivering it, you get to the final solution, the work that you did in between that might be invaluable to 100 other people someday down the road, there's no way to discover it, right? It's typically on your local machine, whether you're writing SQL or you're using a Python notebook or something similar. There's not a great sort of tracking mechanism into a lot of the work that's done. I mean, even if you publish a dashboard in a great BI suite, like there's no understanding what went into that, right? What was the sort of step 1, 2, and 3 before you got to the final result that ended up being published. And so that's what the cursor tries to do, right? We try to sit in between a data store and some sort of presentation layer, whether that be BI or some sort of similar solution, even like business applications, and track the transformation of data, the use of data, and ultimately that kind of translates to understanding. And we do that by, as I kind of say, trying to being an analyst knapsack or best friend, right? So the work that they do, we don't want to change how that's done. We just want to make it discoverable by other people inside the organization that might need it. And we need to be secure and permissive about that, right? Because there's certainly sensitivity to a lot of types of data. But today, a lot of tools that are installed locally that don't have any sort of collaborative aspect to them, we try to sort of replace with something that does.
So got it. Who is your clientele then? I mean, is it a data scientist? Is it the business owner?
Yeah, so I would say there are three sort of main profiles that use the product, right? I think the first one is a traditional business analyst. So someone that works with data day in and day out. They might be producing reports and dashboards. They might be doing some sort of ad hoc querying because maybe they support a line of business like a sales operations team or a marketing leader, and they're answering data questions that are being asked of them. But they're using Cursor as a way of tracking the work that they do, so that if their team is more than one person, as it often is, those individuals can share insight of the work that they do. So if I go build a quarterly sales pipeline for one reason, maybe it's to support a team in Kansas, right? And then someone else in another region wants to go build a second report that does the same thing for a different region. Oftentimes the code is very similar, just maybe a parameter change. That person shouldn't have to start from scratch to get to that answer. So the key is to encourage people to search to see if something exists before they start. Today there's no place to do that, right? If you know the guy, then great, they might send you the code. But if you don't, then there's no platform that would capture that sort of ad hoc code unless it happened to get published to a dashboard. So that's sort of one audience, is analysts. Second audience is sort of engineers and data scientists. I think those folks often get pulled into rudimentary BI type work because either they do because they're using it sort of prepping to actually get to an analysis, or they're being asked because they just happen to know the data the best. And for them, it sort of creates a point of leverage. So like if they can share something once and then everybody else can come find it again without bugging them, that's useful. And then it's also, they write code as well. And so for them to be able to share with their team, we're not replacing a data science like platform per se, but writing Python within the product certainly is something that we see data scientists use. And then the last is actually what I call like a business leader. And it's really for them to interact with the analysts on their team. So for them to be able to search across, a CRM, a BI solution, and even a data store, even though they may not care about the table name in the database, but to see the sort of effort that's going into creating reports, what data lives where, if there's discussions occurring about data quality problems and how they can understand that, to have that all in one place, much like you would like any sort of search engine, I think is something that's valuable to the business leader, so they can understand where their team's having a hard time, and to communicate when there's questions. So 3 personas. The analyst is probably half of it. Data scientist maybe another 20-25%, or data engineer too, I guess, if it's in that bucket, and then business users probably the last quarter-ish.
So if I'm a business user, I just want to, I like, look, I'm going to leave the technical to all the rest of the folks, the analysts and the data scientists, and I just want to report. I can find reports and quickly run reports across any one of the repositories that you have behind the scenes?
We can integrate with. Exactly. And so we're in that case, we're really just trying to operate as a search layer. So a lot of companies have more than one BI solution, right? Marketing might have one, sales might have another, finance might have their own solution, but there's no great way to search across all of them. So where does the pipeline report live? Is it a Tableau dashboard? Is it something in Salesforce? Is it in some other place that I don't even know, maybe MicroStrategy? Who knows where it may be, right? But there's no great way to search across all those platforms, and so we help with that.
Now I have to say, for all the listeners, when I invited you on, I think some of the listeners think I'm always trying to pimp IBM technology, but I had no idea if you even used IBM technology. But let me ask you a question. I'm on the data side. This is making data simple, and I'm let's just say I'm a fan of DB2. Do you support DB2?
We do, of course. Yeah, I mean, it's a great data store. We support, I think anything that talks JDBC under the sun, right? So, if you've got a DB2 instance, you can plug it in, and we see a lot of people do that, right? It's whether it's an operational data store or a data warehouse, like we support each and every one of them.
So it's kind of we've got a version we've got called Watson Studio, or our data science experience platform, where you can share notebooks. Is this on the analyst side? Are you able to share like Python notebooks or Jupyter notebooks, I should say, with the analyst, or is that not really the focus? Just to make sure I understand.
We haven't built what I would call like a full-fledged notebook experience. Like notebook, particularly the interactive, like you write a line of code, you see a quick graph, you write another line of code, there's another graph, like the sort of statistical analysis version of a notebook that Jupyter or even Watson has. I think we see ourselves integrating into those environments more than replacing them, but they do a great job at what they do, right? Like, and there's no need to necessarily reinvent the wheel there. The Python use cases that are in the product are more scripting in nature. So I'm trying to automate something and schedule it to occur once a day, once a week, or every hour, whatever it may be. And it's more of a engineering use of Python than an interactive, exploratory use of Python. So we want to plug into any of those environments. We haven't gotten a whole lot of very deep into that just yet. It's something that's on the roadmap here in the next quarter or so, is to plug into Jupyter and other third-party notebook environments. Like, I think Cloudera has one. You guys have one that would be great to get into, and I think those are things in the near term that we'd like to do, just because, again, like, wherever data lives or wherever understanding of data lives, we want to be able to capture that in one sort of centralized place.
So let me see if I can recap. You got the three personas. You got the analyst, where you share code or grab data. So you can share code to grab data wherever it may live. Then you've got the data science piece that you can add data science. I presume there's some machine learning models you can put in there. You can answer me in just a second. And then the third one is business leader, C-suite or otherwise. They can see the data lineage or use reports to get whatever information that they need. I don't know if you have visualization built into there too. But.
Yeah. So the business leader is really just using it for search, right? So they're using it to, hey, I'm looking for my executive dashboard, where is it? Find it. We're not going to actually recreate it within Cursor. We're literally just showing what that third-party BI solution offers. So wherever that report may live, if we can fit it neatly within our UI and it looks good, we'll do that. Some solutions, though, we actually just link out to it. So our key is to understand what's behind that report. So like if you're looking at, let's say, a financial report, we want to understand the metadata behind it, so that if somebody's looking for a table to get sales data from, and we know that there's this sales report over here, and what the table is that it's pulling from, we can sort of infer what's relevant, and that's useful to the analyst. Maybe not so much to the business leader. So for the business leader, again, we're just searching to find reports wherever they may live, but trying to search across platforms. So anything that a business might have where reports may live, we want to be able to connect to, integrate with, and sort of extract what's there.
So what's the tech, as much as you can tell me without going into your secret sauce, unless you want to tell me that too, but the tech behind Cursor, is it like federation that you're using across all these data repositories? Is it virtualization?
I'm happy to go into depth there. So we're not operating, we do have some federated functionality, although it's not necessarily the key focus. So there's two aspects to Cursor, right? So there's a server component, which is basically all of that centralized knowledge. So if you've got 3 DB2 data stores, and maybe you've got a Postgres data store and a MariaDB database, right? And different teams may use different things. We hook into each one of those using the JDBC driver that would work for each one of those data stores. So if you're DB2, you can bring your JDBC driver with you. If you're using Postgres, we can provide it because it's open source. But either way, the idea is that Cursor has this server that captures this metadata from across all these data stores. There's also, that also enables search, that enables discovery. All the sort of collaboration takes place on that server. It's a SaaS tool. Can be deployed on-prem as well, because we have a lot of regulated businesses that need an on-prem deployment for security purposes. There's also a client component, which is semi-optional in the sense that if you're using our cloud version, you typically would want the client just to enable communication with something that's on-prem and oftentimes behind a firewall. So if you're running some code, we never see the results on our server. You would see it within the client, and that client sort of stops from a security perspective at your machine. So if you're running some code, you can execute it, you see the results on your screen. The metadata about what you did, so the code, maybe the column names or the tables that you interacted with, that gets pushed to the quote-unquote server, wherever it may live. And that the idea there is, again, to enable search. But server is heavily written in Kotlin, so that's that sort of Java sister, if you will, that can talk to all Java libraries. Client, the one that you download is Electron-based, so it's an Electron wrapper that wraps a React app. So much like Slack or a lot of these collaboration tools that you see, they're really just web code, but they're wrapped in a lightweight sort of framework, just so that you can create a more rich user experience. Our product's no different than that. But when you deploy it on-prem, we can actually skip that Electron piece if you want. You can just run the whole thing in a browser. So it's a semi-flexible model in that way. Makes it a little bit easier to to deal with, especially when you get on-prem and you have security concerns.
So you, in a lot of your literature, or when I go out there start reading about Cursor or otherwise, you talk about data fluency. Tell me what that means.
Yeah. So we had this challenge, and I don't know if this was universal. I've seen it in a number of places, which is, when companies talk about data, right? Whether it's a team of analysts in a room, or you've got a big meeting where you've got all levels in the same place. There's oftentimes not a great way to document like what nomenclature is used and what that means. So say someone talks about booking or new business versus renewal business or churn or any sort of topic that ultimately is a business term, but it has data meaning. And so one of the things Cursor tries to do is help companies get on the same page with all of that. So there's a code piece to that, and knowing that, okay, if I'm trying to look up one of these metrics that might have some data underneath it, where do I do that? But then there's also the business glossary aspect of it, and like how do those two relate? And so we have there's a component to Cursor that's how do you document or build a data dictionary or a business glossary, sort of similar things in my world. And so that's where sort of that came from, which is how do you get the whole business on the same page? And if someone's interested in it, and they may see the dictionary term, but they actually want to understand the data, they can do so. That it doesn't stop at just saying, this is the definition of new business, but it actually points to a table that points to a dashboard that uses that table, and so on and so forth.
Sounds like the data silos that you see within businesses, particularly business versus IT, breaking that down to its term data fluency.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, data fluency, literacy, I think it's, more and more people in roles that previously didn't require it are being required to, understand data and where it comes from, and almost, validate that it's accurate. And that's hard to do if you don't have a way to go really learn that.
No, every company is becoming a tech company. I think every person is becoming a data person. They've got it at this point in time.
Yeah, no, you can certainly say it's going that way. I'd agree.
So do you implement AI now? I mean, I think you talked about some of the ML models you can create using your product, but do you also use AI within the product to be able to predict either, or like, give an example, to find some of the data repositories that maybe you didn't know exist, that may have data that is pertinent to whatever search you're asking, or are you still progressing to that point?
Yeah, we use it, and I would call it a lightweight way, right? It's growing in usage. I think step one for us was to get the data in, or metadata in, right? So know where data lives, know where usage of data is occurring. Step two is then how do you build relevance around what people are looking for? So data gets stale really quick, and so if there are reports or dashboards that are out there that are, haven't been viewed in 6 years, or the tables underlying them haven't changed in as much time, how do we filter that out, or at least communicate that to the user that what you're looking at may not be relevant? And so we're using AI to do that in a meaningful way. So as things get ingested into the platform, looking across the platform and seeing if there are other things that are similar, making sure that those relationships are automatically called out or connected or created. And then from a search perspective, when someone goes to look up something, understanding that if what they're searching for has other synonyms within the system that we can then bring up, we do a little bit in that regard. I think over time, as more data gets pulled in, there's greater opportunity to expand how we use AI to improve relevance, to identify things that might be useful to a given user. And on the predictive front, I think that's something that's high on my list, which is once you know what a user cares about or is involved in. So if you have an analyst that's like a sales ops analyst, right, and they're focused on just measuring pipeline and looking at performance and predicting quotas and that kind of thing, there's a number of data topics that they likely care about, and that you can get very quickly just by monitoring their usage and then prescribing to them or showing to them in a predictive way, like, okay, there's a new report that just came out on the other side of the organization that you might care about because it uses 10 tables that you use as well. So that's a way that we look to begin to start deploying some additional AI. So it's lightweight or early in its usage today, but it's growing.
What's the persona of your own team? Is it data engineers, data scientists? Yeah,
so a lot of jacks of all trades as well there. So three of us that started the company. Pat was, I would call it more of like an architect type. I mean, engineer himself. He was a principal engineer with me at ExactTarget. We've known each other for 10, 11 years. He cuts across everything, I would say, but heavily focused on the back end. How do we make sure that we're building a scalable don't fall down when someone imports a data warehouse with 100,000 tables, that kind of thing. Jason is up and down the stack, right? Everything from front end to a lot of the AI has been led by him, and then we've got a couple engineers that are focused on building and delivering the front end. Tommy focuses on leading the front end efforts on actual client and what the user sees in the interface. So we don't have any true data scientists on the team yet. It's something we're hiring for in the coming months that are like by title pure data scientists, more research focused. Everybody does commit production code. I think there's definitely a need for that in the coming months, and as well as probably some data engineering needs to work on our own internal pipelines just to make sure that they stay resilient as the company grows.
You got a pretty strong clientele already, right? How long have you been in existence? 2017 or?
So we started the business on the eclipse in 2017. So it was August 21st, 2017. We had the first version of the product, which was not enterprise based at all, right? It was very much wasn't single user, but it was a team could come on. There were no permissions and controls. It was just let's try this, get it out there, see what people think about it in the spring of last year. And then that enterprise version that you could deploy on-prem that hooked into single sign-on and could be very rigidly controlled within large enterprises came out last fall. And so starting in last May till today, we've got about 1,000 businesses on the product, and everything from a company that comes and tries it that's then starting a sales conversation to we have students that have tried to use it to learn SQL, right? Probably more the former than the latter, but there's a healthy mix there. That's
do you find most of your customers come to you through the try and buy, or do you do cold calling?
We've done some outbound marketing. We actually just ramped that up in December, and we're continuing to grow that just it's more of a branding effort than anything. Like I think challenge in the market these days in any category, whether it's data or otherwise, is just there's a lot of noise out there, and like what is it that I'm looking for to solve my problem, and how do I find something? So we've identified a few personas that we're going after. Analysts or analytics leaders, I think, is probably the top one. And so that's something that's we're putting on. But yeah, most of it's been coming to us, thankfully. We'll reach out to a few people here and there where we see like there's somebody that we think would be interested in what we do, or maybe they've tweeted about something that's relevant, and we'll send them a message. But in general, it's been come to us, which is, knock on wood,
makes sense.
Lucky.
What's your split between on-prem and cloud?
So today we're almost entirely cloud. I think the on-prem discussions, so it's 90% plus. The on-prem discussions, because we just launched it in October, there'll be things that this quarter we'll just start to have our first production on-prem deployments. Right now they're all in POC stage. So that's fun part of the enterprise sales cycle, right? It usually takes a few months to get from first discussion through legal security and then deployed.
Very good, very good. So what's up next for you in Cursor for 2019?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned one of them. AI is a huge initiative internally. I think there's a focus on expanding the number of integrations that we have as a business. Like I think we're only as good as things that we can invest from. So if there's knowledge that lives somewhere that we can't connect to, then it's limiting to our product and our understanding of the data inside the business. And then I think there's sort of the last piece is how we improve that business user experience. So today the product is relatively catered to an analyst. Like you search for code, you see code, you can write Python, you can write SQL, you can see a lot of technical metadata that is probably not all that interesting or exciting to a business user, but there's a way to skin that is, I think, valuable. So instead of searching for something and finding the actual code, you see, okay, Al owns this code, and here's how you reach him on Slack, and here's all the other work that he's done, and maybe here's the dashboard that has that code in it. Just knowing the persona that you're dealing with and catering the UX to fit that person. So that's a big focus as well. And then just continuing to grow the business.
So is the last question, I want to ask you a couple of personal questions just in terms of your career, if you don't mind. Before I do that, what are the takeaways that you'd want our audience to make sure that they don't leave without? And where can they go to get more information? If it's not cursor.com, I presume that's what you might say, but
it's all cursor.com. I mean, happy to connect on LinkedIn or follow us on Twitter, that kind of thing. But I think cursor.com is probably the main place to start. And if you're someone that works with data on a daily basis or weekly basis, whether it means you just, work with an analyst that uses data themselves, or you're actually writing SQL or Python yourself, I think it's certainly try the product, see if it can provide any value. Whether it does or doesn't, I'd actually love to hear, right? I think there's part of the process of starting a company is hearing the good feedback with the bad feedback. And so I have no issues with either. I think it's great to hear how it helps or maybe doesn't. And so would love to anybody to try it and let me know what you think. But that's probably that.
All right. Thank you, Adam. So, hey, I got a couple of questions. This is what I call the lightning round. I think the interesting situation with you is, you've got an interesting career path. So the question I would ask that I would imagine others are interested in, you've had some success with startups, and look, you're on your latest venture. What's the trick? What makes it work? What's the trick to having a successful startup?
Yeah, I'll be honest, right? I'll say the jury's out on Cursor, right? We're still young and growing, right? Things look good so far, but you never know what happens in the future. But I think, in the past, if I look back to ExactTarget and Bright, it's finding really sharp people, right? You don't have to love the problem before you take the role, but love the people, and feel like there's a real opportunity to learn from, those that you'll be probably spending a lot of time around. And so same ExactTarget, right? I literally, true story, I turned the job down 3 times because I couldn't figure out how it was anything more than just spamming people. And then I realized there was this whole opportunity to build, a permission-based marketing and actually really get a deep understanding of a customer and how to send them relevant content. It was early days of marketing automation, and the industry has blown up since then. HubSpot didn't exist. There were a couple of email marketing companies out there, but that was about it. But the people were great, and that was that. Bright was the same thing, right? And moving out west, I think, was a different beast than doing it in the Midwest, where you kind of have each city tends to have a couple of big tech companies on a given decade, but it's not something that you see like you do at the rate on the coast. And so finding people. And then I think the opportunity to start Cursor probably only came about because of the success of Bright, right? So we share. One of the lead investors in Bright is our lead investor, a firm called Toba Capital, that was born out of the sale of a company called Quest Software to Dell many years ago. So when Quest was bought, the proceeds of that became Toba Capital, and they led a big round in Bright, and then also led our first round of money. And so getting access to those people afforded me access to them, and that's what sort of allowed us to come start Cursor. And because they said, okay, well, you did something that worked out okay one time, now we'll give you one more chance, just don't screw it up, right? And so that's big focus on people. And then I think having a problem that you felt. So me going to China I didn't go into the depth on that, but I went every 6 weeks for about a year and a half, just to try and stand up the operation there. And I was sort of focused on the ops side of it, right? So data and analytics and a little bit of sort of CRM and sales and that kind of thing. And we was operating like a startup, right? We didn't have the full bench strength of the 5,000 person LinkedIn team. It was just a handful of us that were going back and forth. And so feeling the pain of not having someone to ask a question is what really drove me to start. So
one last question, and that is the question I like to ask is, where and how do you learn? How do you keep up? You've got to be meeting with customers all the time, but you got to stay on top of things like Python. Hell, you got to try to figure out how you code some of the stuff and tick off some of your developers. Get in their stuff, but
no, you're exactly right. So I read a lot. I try to read, try to read a lot of non-tech as much as I can, because I think so much of life these days is sort of the interpersonal stuff that's getting missed more and more. But in terms of keeping up to date on technology, I listen to a lot of podcasts. So I'm a degenerate runner, and so in the last year I've tried to turn running music into podcast listening, which has been a fun transition. And then in terms of reading, I kind of have a list of things that I read on I wouldn't say daily, but definitely weekly basis. So it's everything from short form news to people following on Twitter to like I said, sort of podcasts, and it collectively, especially if I'm focused mostly on data, it's a manageable thing. I think if you want to talk to me about the latest in Kubernetes and that kind of thing, I'm probably not going to talk for hours on it, because I tend to be a little bit more focused, although we look at that for infrastructure and deployment. But it's reading, I think, is making time to do that, and that's the other thing that comes with maybe answer to your last question, which is just time management. I try to make time to read and keep up to date, because no one's going to tell you like, oh, let's book an hour of your time to not do anything and and do that. You have to make time to read and think.
Well, I'm like you. This is how I got into podcasting. I'm a podcast junkie, and I did it when I was reading. Now my wife says, "What were you listening to?" And then I'll say, "This podcast." She goes, "God, that's boring. I don't know why you can't just turn on some music." But then I don't get as much done, right?
There's a time for both.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I've tried to add a little bit more balance, because I think the pendulum swing too far on the just pounding my head with technical topics. But look, you're well spoken. You articulate your tech well. You've obviously got a great track record. So
thank you.
I don't know how Cursor could not be a success. So I think you're set up for success. And yeah, we should partner as we go forward, and
that'd be great.
Separately just as well. So thank you for joining. I got a lot out of this, and I appreciate it and appreciate your wisdom.
Thanks for having me. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the Making Data Simple podcast, where we make data fun. Be sure to visit IBMBigDataHub.com/podcasts to access the show notes and uncover even more great episodes. Remember, the views expressed here are those of the host and its guests, and do not necessarily represent the views of IBM. Until next time, over and out.